Chapter 13. The Skin. Robbie needed no second telling to get off home. He was out the door and away like a shot from a bow. And every step of the way home, he was telling himself he would never have the courage to be alone in a boat with Earl Corby at midnight. In spite of that, however, he was still powerfully attracted by the thought of finding the great Selkie skin. And it was this attraction which finally stiffened his nerve that night. Long after everyone else was asleep, he was still lying wide-eyed in his box of darkness. His ears were alert for the chimes of the grandfather clock in the butt end, and on the first stroke of midnight, he slid open the door panel of his bed. Silently he stepped out onto the cold floor. Silently he bundled into his clothes and crept barefoot into the butt end. With his shoes still in his hand, he stole past the door that led through to the barn where Finn Learson lay sleeping. Carefully he eased up the latch of the door, slipped outside, and latched it as carefully behind him. Above him the sky was black with the deep, velvety blackness of northern skies in winter. A million stars had burned holes of frosty silver in the velvet black. Frost licked the silver fire over the grass underroot. Robbie shivered as he bent to put on his shoes, but a frosty night meant that there would be little wind, even at sea, and he was glad of that. Running fast and silently, he headed for the beach and saw the tall, stooped figure of Earl Corby waiting for him. The schoolmaster was standing beside the Hendersons' little boat, and without a word, as Robbie arrived behind him, he gave a hand to push it out. The two of them clambered aboard, and Robbie bent to the oars. Earl Corby sat opposite him, hunched up into the tailcoat he wore now instead of his black gown, and he spoke only once before they reached the Yo. "Did you tell anyone?" "No one," Robbie answered, thankful he could speak truthfully. They reached the narrow entrance passage to the Yo, and too narrow to allow even a reflection of starlight from the water. Robbie backed the boat in, feeling mortally afraid of what just might happen in the darkness of this roofless tunnel. But they came out into the wider water beyond, with Earl Corby sitting as silent and motionless as before. The boat touched the shingle, and he shipped the oars, then leapt ashore. Earl Corby came clumsily after him, and they pulled the boat up onto the beach. "Up there, right at the back of the rocks," whispered Robbie, pointing to where the cave lay. And reaching inside his coat, Earl Corby brought out a piece of candle and a tinderbox. "We'll need these," he remarked, then motioned Robbie on. Robbie had forgotten it would be quite dark inside the cave, and this reminder was enough to make him determined he would not be the first to enter it. He clambered on over the rocks, hearing Earl Corby following close behind, and at the mouth of the cave he turned to say nervously, "We better light the candle now." A sound that might have been a chuckle came from Earl Corby. "Afraid of the dark, are you?" he jeered, and the next instant Robbie felt a large hand grasping him by the scruff of the neck and forcing him forward into the cave. Darkness stole his eyesight, smothered him, ate him up. He cried out, gaspingly, then tore himself free of Earl Corby's grip and backed until he hit the wall of the cave. A laugh echoed hollow in his ears. The laugh was followed by the sound of Earl Corby striking the flint of his tinderbox. A spark leaped golden through the darkness. The little light flare of the tinder came next. Then at last, as Earl Corby lit the candle from the flare, there was a small but growing pool of real light. The beaky dark face of Jarl Corby loomed into the light, his eyes searching out the covering figure of Robbie. "You did that just to frighten me," Robbie accused him shakingly. And Jarl Corby smiled a smile that was not pleasant to see. "That's right," he answered. "There's nothing like a taste of fear to remind you of what could happen if you break the promise you made me." The light flickered for a moment as he raised the candle high. He waited till the flame steadied. Then, turning slowly about, he let its light spread through the cave. The sealskin was there, laying spread right out to cover a wide rock shelf a few feet from the floor of the cave. The fur of it was the color of Finlayson's hair, dark, almost black, streaked with silvery gray, and it shone so richly that it seemed to turn the whole pool of candlelight into gleaming black and glittering silver. Jarl Corby and Robbie stood staring at it, both of them struck quite dumb at the sight. The empty sockets of the head of the silky skin stared back at them, and after a few moments of this, Robbie found he could no longer face the eeriness of that empty stare. He turned his head away, and the movement broke the spell of silence in the cave. "Well, there it is," Jarl Corby said triumphantly. "The great Selkie's skin. And we two are the only two in the world who have ever seen it like this." Robbie nodded and asked nervously, "And what do we do now?" "You take this," said Jarl Corby, handing him the candle. Then, much to Robbie's horror, he reached up and pulled the skin down from the shelf as casually as he would have pulled a blanket off a bed. "And I take this," he added, as the skin came tumbling off the shelf. Bundling the great pile of it into his arms, he was about to turn away from the shelf, but Robbie's eyes had caught a sudden glimpse of something else there. "Look," he exclaimed, pointing to the back of the shelf, and Jarl Corby looked where he pointed. There was a gleam of gold there, a gleam from a scatter of golden coins that had lain hidden under the skin. "Fetch one down and let me have a look at it," Jarl Corby commanded. Gingerly, Robbie stretched a hand out to one of the coins, and one glance as he passed it to Jarl Corby was enough to tell him that it was the same as the gold coin winking on the mantelpiece at home. "So you were right all along," Jarl Corby remarked, turning the coin curiously over between his fingers. "And to think how bold he was all along the line too, with all the hints he gave you of the truth behind it. Something I picked up in my travels. Take the gold, for it may still cost you more than you think to have me here. A keepsake of me when I have gone back to my own country. Remember, it did not seem half as bright to me as the gold of your daughter's hair." The hints Jarl Corby had mentioned raced through Robbie's mind again, and he wondered how long it had taken old Da to make sense of these. Not long, he realized, remembering the hard look old Da had given on the day he asked Finlayson, "And what do you think I should tell Robbie about the Selkies?" Jarl Corby tossed the coin back among the fellows. "We'll have to leave them here," he said grimly, "for even one of them taken ashore could trace this night going back to us, and so weep no tears for lost riches, my lad." Robbie took a resentful glance at him. "You'll not catch me shedding tears for Selkie gold," he declared, "and there's no need for you to tell me we could buy nothing but trouble with it. I knew that as soon as I guessed we would find it here." "Well, well," said Jarl Corby, staring at this look and the tone of voice that went with it. "You're quite a spirited lad after all, it seems. But considering how much is going to depend on you on Upholia, that's just as well, isn't it?" Turning on his heel then, He marched out of the cave carrying the skin, and Robbie followed him down to the boat, wondering what this last remark had meant. Once started on the return journey too, he felt his curiosity about it growing sharper with every stroke of the oars. But when at last he did venture a question on it, Jarl Corby told him curtly, "It's too soon to talk about that, but this much I can tell you. Before we part tonight, I'll give you some of the instructions you'll need to carry out your part on Aphalia. Tomorrow, once you're sure you haven't been missed from home this past hour or so, I'll give you the rest of these instructions. And meanwhile, the important thing for us is to find some other hiding place for the Selkie skin." "That's true," agreed Robbie, his thoughts flashing the other caves he could have seen in the other Vyos. "But where can we hide it?" "Nowhere at sea," said Jarl Corby, as if guessing these thoughts, because that is the first place Finlayson would search for it. "Nowhere on land, because that is the second place he would search. We will hide it in a place that belongs neither to the sea nor to the land, a place that is open to every eye, but secret from all. A place which Finlayson may enter as a man, yet which he cannot leave again except as the great Selkie." Robbie stopped rowing to peer at the hunched figure opposite him. "There's no such place," he said wonderingly. "How can there be?" Jarl Corby made no answer to this, and after Robbie began rowing again, he continued to sit in silence. The boat grounded at last on the home beach. Together they drew it on to the shingle. Then, still without another word spoken between them, Jarl Corby took Robbie to the place where he meant to hide the skin.